We're looking today at the Elven Star of the Sun, in particular, the second point of the Elven Star. The second point relates, in terms of correspondences, to the second plane of consciousness in Sufism, or the astral plane, which in the seven-word system is given the label hello. And this intuitive label gives you a real clue as to the kind of energy that we're discussing here. Hello, meeting new people, meeting new ideas, new situations, and expanding our sort of curiosity. Oh, what's that? I'm really interested to meet new ideas. So we can see that the Elven Star of the Sun, having 7 points, begins with the word no, which is, let me read out the words I've written on this. Refusal was inauthentic, the word no. Rejection of non-essential qualities and behaviors, energizing boundaries to protect essence. So that's the Sabian symbol itself. That's the first point of the Elven Star. Now today we're going on to the second point, which is the hello point, as I've said. Expansion of self-definition, legitimate growth, curiosity into self, the study of the self, seeing the self as expressed through our interests and casual friends. So we can see that even though we are who we are, that's not static, it's alive. Nothing living is static. So even though authentically expressing yourself in childhood as having these characteristics, which in fact are still recognizable when you're old, same interests and same general way of being, last a lifetime, but they don't stay static, they develop. And this first level of development, shall we say, is just reaching out and seeing what is the environment of our being. So the second point of the Elven Star, when you look at the Sabian symbol of that one, you get a sense of what you do in order to grow your sense of who you are. With curiosity, typically with study, typically by meeting new ideas, new people, therefore probably traveling a little bit. Now, if you remember, my first point was this old man trying to teach things and not getting very far, not doing very well at that. Now, the second point is called the Jewish rabbi. This is my second point. Settled traditional wisdom, a Jewish rabbi. And it's to do with following traditional teachings. Well, in a word, I don't. I certainly don't follow traditional teachings. I disagree with some of them. I disagree with lots of them. And that's what I teach. And that's why I'm not much able to express what I think, because it's very, very different from traditional teaching. So how come I can have the second point of my Elven Star to do with that exact thing? And the answer is that I'm curious to find out about the settled traditional teachings, just to discover if they are valid for me. And if not completely valid, can I find some validity within them? So I've actually studied these teachings, not only actually some Jewish mantra and some understandings of what that refers to, but every religion. I've studied Islam in some depth, and Buddhism a little bit, and paganism quite a lot, and I've really got into the traditional teachings, and I find gems of wisdom in each of them. Every single spiritual tradition that I've studied has got something remarkably worthwhile having. And even though I perhaps reject 80%, 90% of the teachings, some of it stays with me. And I build my personality on assimilating those parts which I agree with into my protocols, my practices, and my ways of being. For example, the Jewish tradition, speaking of Jewish rabbi, is very much to do with tradition itself. There are certain things that you do, and everyone in your community does that, and that binds you into the community. It identifies you as part of the community. And I find a great deal of wisdom and comfort in that. There are certain things that I know are English things, and I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of being English at all. I don't think the English have got a good history, but there are certain aspects of being an Englishman and having a culture to follow that I really do approve of. Like, for example, there's this concept of the eccentric English gentleman who lives alone with his own little bit of land and has a rather eccentric way of living, and he just dresses how he likes, does what he wants, but he's a man of honor, he's a truth teller. And I most assuredly aspire to that, and that's because of the tradition that's passed down. That's just a sacred aspect of being a good Englishman, and not the politicians, or the hoi polloi, but a good Englishman, a man who is a man of honor. I definitely like that, and that's a part of my personality I didn't have when I was a child. I had to develop that when push came to shove in different situations. Sometimes I did the right thing, even though it cost me, because I prioritized dignity of being, an honorable thing to do above expediency. And I try and do that all of the time. It's just that it takes a lot of oomph to do that. I've also embraced teachings from other traditions. My Christian influence in childhood, I didn't like it at all. It was grey and boring, and it seemed illogical and wrong, and I didn't like the teachings. But one or two gems popped up. Seek and ye shall find. That's really useful. And forgiveness. That's good. I like that one. There's quite a few teachings within Christianity that I approve of totally, but I don't much like the Christian church. It doesn't work for me. In Islam, that's a little bit too rigorous. The disciplines of Islam, when you actually see what are the requirements of being a good Muslim, nobody actually makes it, and I don't think that's appropriate. However, some of the spiritual practices within Islam, the esoteric side, are so beautiful and powerful. I've taken them on. I've studied the Sufi teachings in some depth. So I can go through all of the spiritual traditions that I've studied, and I find I've embraced bits of it, but not to the point where I want to teach the tradition itself. I don't want to teach Islam. I don't want to teach Judaism or Christianity or paganism even, because I've got beliefs and opinions and practices that are from different traditions and perhaps don't coincide with the teachings of any particular tradition. So I've expanded my sense of self most assuredly by taking on different spiritual traditions, but I've not betrayed my authentic sense of self. And that makes me feel like I've grown and I've deepened the authentic expression of self in that way. So that's the second point, the expression of self, expansion of self-definition. That's the second point. Legitimate growth. So you only do what the law within yourself, the protocols of being authentic, legitimate growth. Curiosity into self. Well, here I've studied myself deeply. Any astrologer can say that about themselves. We look deeply into the nuances of who we are. And by looking at the theory of who we are, according to the books, and comparing that to the practice of who we are according to our life experiences, then you understand. You can't get it from books. Astrology books, they're written about groups. It's a social science, astrology. They study groups. Most Tauruses are like this. It doesn't say anything about any individual Taurus, so you can't believe the books willy-nilly, but you can use that suggestion to compare your own personal experience. And by doing that, you expand very deeply your awareness of self, which is a primary concern for anyone on a spiritual path. So, in reading stuff and traveling and meeting new people and doing all these hello-like things, I've come to know myself to be able to express authenticity of self more widely, legitimately, without corruption of my principles. And I think this is the second point of the Elven Star. That's what it's for.